Good morning and welcome once again to the Scots in Us, the ASF bi-weekly podcast. I'm so delighted that we're going to be kicking off the Burns season by speaking with Alan D. Beck, who is president of the Robert Burns World Federation, direct from Scotland. So good morning, Alan. It's lovely to see you again.
It's lovely to see you. It's actually afternoon here, and if you look behind me, you'll see that it's already getting dark, such as the Scottish winter.
I was thinking that it is quite a few years since we met. You used to come across in your other life when you were singing with Caledonia and perform as the tenors. Were you the three tenors of Scotland? But your wonderful voice. They've always been wonderful evenings, I remember.
Yeah, we used to love coming. Caledon, Scotland's three tenors. We first came over, I think, to sing at the British Memorial Garden, which of course was a memorial for 9/11. And yeah, many happy memories of singing at the ASF for Burns suppers and Tartan Day and various events like that. Yes, and had a bit more hair in those days, and my beard was a bit darker. But yeah, haven't really changed.
No, and we're going to, in our email exchange, you agreed to sing for us today, which we look forward to hearing in a little bit. But as we begin January, we really also begin the season of Burns, and it goes for many weeks. And I know that you're being called upon to do the immortal memory probably several times. How long is the Burns season for you this year?
The Burns season is normally long for me every year, to be honest, but this particular year, as president of the Robert Burns World Federation, it's a lot more busy than it is. In fact, I'm proposing the immortal memory, I think it's about 22 times this year, and my immortal memory also includes some singing. So if I'm not singing as part of my immortal memory, sometimes they also have said, will you also provide the songs for the evening? So my first one is Wednesday, the 11th of January. And I think my last one is March the 17th. So basically every Friday and Saturday in January, February, and the beginning of March has gone. But it's amazing how many people have their Burns suppers on club nights, the nights that their club would normally meet. So for instance, I have them on Mondays. I've got them on Wednesdays. I've got them on Thursdays as well this year. I don't think I've got any Tuesdays. I have actually done Burns suppers on Sundays before, Sunday lunchtimes. So it's a very busy season for me normally, but it's even busier this year.
Now, the Robert Burns World Federation is there to unite, promote, and ensure the legacy of Robert Burns around the world, and to help grow the understanding and love. So this is in two parts. If we could begin to look at what it is that makes this so important, and how it means so much to the Scottish community around the world. And then I'll ask question two.
Sure. Robert Burns obviously died at the end of the 18th century, and he was famous in Scotland when he died. There was thousands of people turned up at his funeral. But of course, in those days, no steamships, no steam trains, no telegraph. It was not as easy to become world famous as it might be now, where you could be an internet sensation overnight. It took a bit of time for Burns's international reputation to really build, and it really built because of Scots emigrating to other English-speaking parts of the world, of course to the British Empire, but also to the US. There were literally, well, I think it's something in the region of about 35 million people in the US currently claim Scottish descent. when they emigrated, they wanted to take part of their nationality with them. They took their kilts, for instance. They took their songs, but they took Robert Burns as a Scottish hero and as something that could unite them. And really, Burns is classless. People might think that Burns is a working class hero. Well, of course he is. He's a hero to all the working classes. He was a working class man himself. But he was also at this time particularly talismanic, I suppose, to the middle classes. And the middle classes really took to Burns. The upper classes, of course, they were spending thousands and thousands of pounds or guineas, as it would have been in those days, to build statues of Burns and monuments to him. And so Burns has remained classless, but what he really has remained is a focus of Scottish nationality. And really, here in Scotland, everybody, absolutely everybody would know who Robert Burns was, and they would know the famous Naismith portrait of Robert Burns or the Skilling illustration. They would know Burns. But actually, when you go abroad and you speak to anyone from any sort of English-speaking community, you only have to sing a couple of bars of Auld Lang Syne, and straight away they know what you're talking about. And in fact, Auld Lang Syne is a song which was made famous really amongst Scots abroad, not necessarily amongst Scots in Scotland. So in fact, we in Scotland, I think, owe some of our understanding and our recognition of Burns to Scots who had emigrated abroad. So you asked the question why it's such an important event. It's an important event really for the idea of being Scottish. It could be whiskey, it could be kilts, it could be shortbread, it could be heather, it could be golf, but actually more often than not, it's Robert Burns, and that's why he was voted the greatest ever Scot in 2009. So that's one of the reasons that Burns is really so important. He gives Scottish people a focus for their national identity. So, for instance, when you're thinking about your homeland and you're thinking about the things that make you feel patriotic, a lot of it's to do with folk music. A lot of it's to do with the songs and the poetry which you grew up with and which you heard your parents, your grandparents, your neighbours performing, or even things which you would have done in school. Perhaps you may have learned some poems, you may have learned some songs. So Burns adds also a great touch of nostalgia to people, and the idea that it connects you with your past, and your past also could be your parents' past, your grandparents' past, your ancestors' past. So Burns is a very, very important figure in Scottish nationality and in Scottish history.
But he was a great poet, a great writer, and I think that he just wasn't a songsmith. He did so much more.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, the most important thing about Burns is perhaps his understanding and the way that he is so empathetic to the condition of people like himself, but not just that, the environment, to animals. I mean, the poem To a Moose is a work of genius. Burns looks at a mouse, a poor field mouse, and he compares them to a man. And that's quite a genius thing to do, but actually, the fact that in the end he decides that the mouse is better off than he is, because the mouse just gets on with its life, it's not frightened about the future. That's incredibly empathetic. He talks about the destruction of the mouse's home because man is ploughing the fields. And there is so much that Burns talks about, being someone who lived out in the countryside. So much he talks about rivers and mountains and flowers and some of the local wildlife. He, of course, wrote a poem about a wounded hare that had been shot in the field. He was a great empathetic poet. And of course, if you're at all empathetic yourself, you're going to be touched by the emotions in his poetry.
I think that when we're far away from home, that is why societies and organizations mean so much, because it helps us to reconnect. And I think that is why I'm very excited that we're now been launching with you the American Friends of the Robert Burns World Federation, which ASF is a partner with you in, as a way for people to do their memberships over here. And through that, you then can invest and help and issue grants to organizations for Robert Burns over here in the United States, so that it will help all around. And also, I'm excited by the fact that we're going to be working with you on your writing awards for young people. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. What you said is exactly true. Organizations like ASF connect. They connect people across the Atlantic Ocean. They connect people within the US. Our connection with the ASF is going to be of great importance to us, because there are so many people out in North America who are Burns fans who perhaps haven't joined the Burns Club for whatever reason. Maybe there isn't one too close by, but they can certainly become an American friend of the Robert Burns World Federation, and their donations would be helping projects, as you say, the writing project, which we're currently putting together. The idea that that someone would be writing, say, a letter in the style of Robert Burns, who was a prolific letter writer in those days, and being judged by a Scottish academic, and just bringing the idea of that Burns connection to people who perhaps haven't really thought about that sort of thing in North America, I think is a very, very exciting prospect. Very exciting indeed.
So now let's take a moment to hear some music from you. What would you like to introduce us to?
Well, as you say, we're coming up to the Burns season. Everyone who's watching this podcast who has been to a Burns supper will no doubt have heard Robert Burns' famous address to the haggis. Fair fa your honest sonsy face, great chieftain of the pudding race. At the end of it all, of course, the dagger stabs the haggis, cuts it open, and the poem goes on about the qualities of this magnificent traditional Scottish country fare, I think we'll put it as. I love haggis. It's very, very tasty. Everyone's probably heard that poem if they've been to a Burns supper, but they've only ever heard it recited because it's only ever been a poem. However, there is an extremely talented Glaswegian musical arranger, a chap called Alan Craig. Alan has accompanied me singing at many, many, many Burns events over the years. And Alan had decided that he felt the accompaniment usually performed when someone was singing a Burns song was a bit simple, and as far as he was concerned, just wasn't as interesting as it could be. So Alan has arranged brand new arrangements of 10 Burns songs, but one of the poems he decided to use was the address to haggis, and this particular one therefore didn't have a melody. So Alan has written the melody, and he has written a particularly energetic piano accompaniment to go. So Alan and I recorded some of these songs in a studio in Glasgow just before Christmas, and in fact this will be the world premiere of anyone hearing me singing and Alan Craig playing the piano to Address to the Haggis.
Great chieftain o' the puddin' race, up in them all you take your place, paint striper firm. Where are you worthy o' a grace as lang's my aim? The groaning trencher there ye fill, like a distant hill. Your bin would help to mend a mill in time o' need, while through your pores the dews they still like amber bead. His knife see rustic labour dashed, and cut ye up where red is slashed, trenching your groaning entrails bricht like ony ditch. And then, oh, what a glorious sight war reeking ridge. Then horn for horn they stretch and strive, deal tack the hindmost horn they drive, till all their wheel-swelled planks belie are bent like drums. Then all good man mislike to rive be thanked arms. Is there that our his French ragout, or olio would stow a sou, or fricassee would make her spew with perfect scunner, looks down with sneer and scorn for view on sick a dinner. Poor devil, see him o'er his trash, as feckless as a weathered rash. His spindle shoik, a good whiplash, his neve and knit, through bloody flood of field to dash, oh, how unfit. But mark the rustic haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread. Clap in his wally neve a blade, he'll make it whistle, and legs and ends and heads will sned like taps of thistle. He powers for make mankind your care, and dish them out their bill of fare. Old Scotland wants they stinking wear the jumps in luggies. But if you wish her great for bread, gie her a haggis.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Alan. We're very honoured to be the world premiere for it. But Alan, also you had another first recently, which was when the Lord Lion issued the official coat of arms for Robert Burns to the Robert Burns World Federation.
Yep.
This has got quite a story to it, because it turns out that Robert Burns did want to have a coat of arms and had started to talk. I believe the story is right on this, is that he began to talk to the Lion Court about how that would come about, but it never happened. But now, 240 years later, it's been issued. Could you complete the story for how this all has come about?
So Robert Burns was indeed very interested in heraldry. Lots and lots of people at that time were very, very interested in heraldry and had some basic heraldic knowledge. Burns actually wrote down what's called a blazon, which means it's a simple heraldic word meaning a description of what he wanted on his coat of arms. He sent that in a letter to a friend, and that letter still survives to this day. He actually described it perfectly. And so you would have imagined that he would have had this coat of arms drawn up and registered over 2 centuries ago. In fact, he didn't. And the reason he didn't is very possibly because he was poor and he couldn't afford to do so. Well, that coat of arms has been knocking about in that letter for a number of years. And it always struck me as a real shame that Burns had never been able to do it. And when I became junior vice president of the Robert Burns World Federation, I had the senior vice president and the president at the time to a meeting with the Lord Lyon. We had this meeting with the Lord Lyon, who happens to be a keen Burnsian, has done the Immortal Memory on several occasions, and in fact is doing it several times this year also. I believe he did it in New York just last year. He basically said, I've been waiting for a number of years for the Robert Burns World Federation to approach me about this, because it is something that really should be done. So we raised the money, and we had the coat of arms registered for Robert Burns, and the Lord Lyon has the complete discretion about what goes into a coat of arms. He gave Robert Burns exactly what Robert Burns asked for, but he added many extra honours because of the importance of Robert Burns to the Scottish nation. In fact, I have a copy of it right here.
Oh, that's wonderful. And
go.
I know how wonderful those are, because we have got one right up.
Oh, I can see one, yes, for the American Scottish Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that coat of arms has supporters, which are the two animals that hold the coat up, and it also has flags. One of the flags is the St Andrew's Saltire, the national banner for Scotland. That would only be given to an individual who had great significance to the nation of Scotland. The supporters would only be given really to clan chiefs, members of the royal family, Knights of the Thistle. So the fact that he was given that by the Lord Lyon shows the importance that Burns has to the Scottish nation. So yes, that was indeed a first, and that was an extremely proud moment for me. My name happens to be on it. Because the three of us, the president at the time, the senior vice president, and myself as junior vice president, we were what's called the petitioners. So our names are on the grant of arms for Robert Burns, and that is owned by the Robert Burns World Federation, and it was given to the Federation on behalf of Robert Burns posthumously. So the Federation actually owns this particular piece of, I would say, artwork, because in fact heraldry is an art, but it's a legal document. And in fact, I haven't said this to you, Camilla, but we would like to present the American Scottish Foundation with a copy of this that you might perhaps wish to auction off to some of your members, and hopefully raise a bit of cash. But it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And yes, that indeed is a first, and it's a first that I'm very proud of.
And you're going to be over here in New York, a bit delayed because you were going to come over last year, but for Tartan Week, New York Tartan Week, the 25th anniversary of the parade. And
Sure.
Can't wait for you to be here and for us to be able to celebrate in so many different ways all that is going on with the Robert Burns World Federation, and how other people can now become involved. We have a page where they can become a member of the American Friends, and we look forward to doing so much more with you and everybody around the country. So thank you for joining us today, and to a great Burns season. And now let us conclude with some other music from you. What would you like us to listen to at this moment?
I've been singing this song for many, many years. And the reason I've been singing the song for many years is because it's a piece of art. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. The melody is fantastic, but the lyrics are wonderful. It was described by Sir Walter Scott as containing the essence of 1,000 love songs. And in typical Scottish style, it's a love song about the pain of lost love. And it's Robert Burns' A Fond Kiss.
farewell, alas, deep in our drunk tears I'll pledge thee. Warring sighs and groans I'll wage thee.
I'm delighted this morning that I'm joined by Sarah Beattie from the National Trust of Scotland. She is the Regional Director for Ayrshire and Arran, Dumfries and Galloway, with special responsibility for the Burns Birthplace Museum. And this morning we're going to speak with her regarding the recently acquired Honnesfeld Library Burns books and papers. And you have some wonderful news for us, Sarah, of how we are going to be able to enjoy these works in the coming months.
Yes, I do. So we will be hosting an exhibition of the new acquisitions on site here at the Birthplace Museum in Alloway. That will run from the 13th of January until the 12th of March. It includes all 12 works that we've individually acquired and also the jointly acquired First Common Praise book with the National Library of Scotland.
When is the exhibit opening?
The exhibition opened on the 13th of January and it's running through to the 12th of March.
Wonderful. It must be so wonderful to be able to have people able to see the works now. Is there anything special you're planning during this time of having the works as a focus?
We've got a number of events planned at this time of year, obviously with Burns' birthday, Burns night evening and celebrations. So we haven't specifically planned anything around this exhibition, but we will be doing our general celebrations on site and really showcasing the new acquisitions as part of our yearly traditions.
So which work is the most outstanding to you and the most poignant for you to see return to Scotland?
I think probably the First Commonplace book is probably the most significant. We know that Burns wrote it before he was published, so when he was a young man living in Ayrshire. So for it to be able to come back into not only Scotland, but to be able to be partly owned by ourselves in Ayrshire, I think is a real showpiece for the collection and a fantastic opportunity to bring something like that home.
Now, if people want to come to the Birthplace Museum, are you asking that they reserve tickets or something like that, or can they just turn up?
No, they can turn up. So the exhibition itself of the new acquisitions is free. There are sort of standard NTS membership or admission prices for the museum generally, but the new material can be viewed for free on site.
And what will people see? Will they be seeing, they'll be seeing the books? Will they be able to see some of them turning the pages? Will there be some explanations?
So you're only able to read the first pages, but you can really see the full extent of each piece. We've included captions as well, just giving a bit of an outline. So obviously some of the writing can be quite difficult to read. So we've kind of explained what it is that people are seeing and the broader context too. And then with the First Commonplace book, it will be open at just one page. So there's lots of kind of conservation issues to think about when displaying works like this on paper. So it will just be one page.
And you are starting a project, aren't you, to digitize the works. I was just reading a little bit about that. Can you tell us a bit more and how people could maybe be involved in supporting this, which is rather wonderful?
Yes, so we are running a project partly inspired by this new acquisition, where we are aiming to get the Burns collection to start with online to make it much more publicly accessible. So as I said, it can be quite tricky to view these documents in person because they're very sensitive. But by digitizing the different pages and the full extent of the letters, people will be able to search, read an entire manuscript, or flick through a book, perhaps, that Burns has annotated. So this project will really help open up the individual items, but also open up the collection to a much broader and an international audience as well.
I think that's wonderful. So not everybody can travel and be with you, but they love Burns. They celebrate, especially at this time of year, we're celebrating with Burns suppers all over the world. But this means that they can really enjoy it and take their time to review it. So is that project now underway?
We have just appointed one of the project officers, I believe. So the project is in very early stages just now. There's a lot of work to be done, as you can imagine. There's a lot of, we have a vast collection here, and we have multiple images of each item. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that's going on at the minute. And then hopefully with additional donations and funding, we'll be able to do something really fantastic in the sort of public too distant future.
Well, a few years ago, we were very fortunate to do an event in conjunction with you around the Gregg violin.
Yes.
And that lives with you at the museum, doesn't it?
It does, yes. Yes, it does. It's here in the museum.
So I think what we should do to finish this piece is listen to the wonderful Gregg violin being played for us when you visited the United States. That really was wonderful. I'm so glad to have this chance, Sarah, to learn a bit more and know that this means a great deal to everyone listening. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me.